October 5th, 2022, 6 p.m., I bring on the city regular meeting to order. This meeting will be conducted in person and also virtual public participation through the Zoom. It will be streamlined on the YouTube and also on the city civic website. And also it will be televised for on the local channel 27. We started our meeting by Pledge of Allegiance. I would like to invite Judy to lead us for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I would like to ask City Clerk Ms. Rebecca Barr for roll call, please.
Councilmember Agramonte?
Here?
Councilmember Felder?
Here.
Councilmember Lowe?
Here.
Vice Mayor Barnett?
Here.
Mayor Ding?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Since the last our city council meeting, our city council has no any closed section meeting, so no any item to share with the public. Next, I want to approve today's meeting's agenda. If any change, it's the time. Thank you.
I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Agramonte?
Aye.
Councilmember Felder?
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Ding?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Let's go to regular agenda. Agenda number 1, comments from the public. It is the time for the public. You can make the comments on any item not appearing on this agenda. It is recommended you keep your comments 3 minutes or less. Start by stating your name and how to spell it. Thank you.
Great. Good evening, members of the public and members of City Council. My name's Emily Ramey. I'm a resident of El Verano. I live on Cherry Avenue, 530 Cherry Avenue, and I've lived here for just about 12 years. Very happy to be here tonight. I'm here actually representing a friend and somebody who I would call a mentor, Damon Connolly, who is running for State Assembly District 12. I worked very closely with Damon when I was an employee at Marin Clean Energy. He was chairman of the board, and I got to see firsthand how he dealt with staff folks like myself, members of the public, his constituents, and as a public servant on an elected body. And I was very impressed by that. Fast forward to today, he's obviously carried many different hats, worn many different hats, carried a lot of different responsibilities, and has collected a whole array of endorsements locally for this race. And so I won't go over those in too much detail, but I have some information I wanted to share with City Council and members of the public. Obviously, the City of Sonoma itself is no longer in Assembly District 12 as of this year. However, there are statewide issues that impact the City of Sonoma and the surrounding greater Sonoma Valley, which Damon would serve as an elected representative in the State Assembly. Not forgetting, of course, SDC and the developments there, which might have probably some of the biggest impact in terms of constituents, lifestyle here, traffic, home values, etc., amongst other issues around environmentalism, sustainability, labor, jobs, homelessness, tourism, etc. So I wanted to invite everybody to a meet and greet for the candidate next Thursday, October 13th. We are hosting it at the Sonoma Community Center Secret Garden from 5:30 to 7:30. We would welcome folks to attend, even if you're not technically in the district anymore. We want all the support we can get up in Sonoma. Damon has a very strong following in Marin. And a pretty strong following in Sonoma, but we need him to get out and meet more folks here in the Sonoma Valley. And so we're really hopeful that we can invite folks to come and participate, meet the candidate, answer some of the questions that you have about his leadership background and what he plans to do in that role should he be elected. Thank you so much, and I'll leave these flyers with everybody.
Thank you so much.
Where should I leave these? Thanks.
Anybody from the public, from the Zoom, please?
No one's raising their hand at this time, Mayor Ding.
All right. Let me close public comments. Let's move to agenda number 2, meeting dedications.
I have none.
You have none. How about Sandra? Okay. I do have Barbara C. Amis. She passed away in Sonoma on March 29, 2022. Barbara was born on the May 17, 1925, in town of Crawfordsville, Indiana. It is a small town west of the capital of Indiana, which is Indianapolis. Her husband, Davy Amis, was an early famous American anthropologist. Barbara helped her husband with academic research, intellectual pursuits as editor, typist, and common sense advisor, and also traveling company. When she turned 35 years old, they moved to San Francisco, Mill Valley, and then finally moved to Sonoma around 1992. The Bay Area became Barbara's home base for about next 62 years. Barbara loved Sonoma, and she got her wish to spend the last 25 years of her life in Sonoma with the members of her family. She lived for almost 97 years, had many adventures, and was the witness to a century of incredible change. Thank you. And also, Barbara was very interested in the local politics. I remember 4 years ago when I was starting running for the city council, and she signed the paper and endorsed me. I still remember. If no any other items, I will move to agenda number 3, presentation. Number 3.1, celebrate Sonoma, presentation of the certificate of recognition in honor of Harley Kyle. I would like to pass to you. Or
Oh, thank
yes,
you. I think you're prestigious, so you're the mayor, but I'd like to just say a few things
Definitely.
before. Holly, if you would step forward. Thank you so much. So we're celebrating, we're celebrating this, obviously, Celebrate Sonoma. And Holly Kyle, of course, I first met you years ago when I started volunteering for what we're talking about this evening. I'm an event coordinator. I haven't done one in a long time, but I thought there's no way I can do what you did. There were hundreds and hundreds of volunteers there. You fed them, you moved them through the campus, and then each person who was there was assigned to a class, and that's what we did. Listen to senior projects, which I thought were wonderful. It was a wonderful program, so I really appreciate that. So since moving to Sonoma 46 years ago, you always believed in paying it forward, and you certainly have done that. So as I said, there were so many people there. They decided, when the Sonoma Valley High School decided to stop doing the senior projects, Holly ramped it up to where some 300 plus local citizens, people from all walks of life. I knew some people, there were some people I'd never met before, but I ran into them every year. It was a great interaction between residents who had never stopped on campus and the students they saw walking around town. Holly was one of the founders of Teacher Support Network, along with Steve Lesfidez, Henry Grouse, Lynn Ross. She helped create one of the best volunteer systems to help the Sonoma Valley High School teachers, starting with 2 teachers willing to give it a try. She helped ramp it up to where we had some 40 plus volunteers showing up for an hour a week to help some 15 teachers at no cost to the school. It was finally taken over by the Education Foundation, which ran it until the Sonoma Valley High School decided they didn't want to do it anymore. So paying it forward is not just your senior projects. It's being a board member and chairman of the Vintage Festival for 20 years ago. The Vintage Festival about 20 years ago, board member and chairman of Sweetheart Auction for the Boys and Girls Club during 9/11. That was really a tough event to pull off. Board member and chairman of Hit the Road Jack race fundraiser, champion swimmer, and inducted into the International Swimmers Hall of Fame in Orlando, Florida. Should I mention at 82, which is amazing. She still practices with her teammates 3 days a week, plays golf 2 days a week, and works out with a trainer once a week. I want to invite you personally to October 16th, if you're here, to the opening of the swimming pools, because I think we need to honor you, make sure that people understand the wonderful things you've done, especially as a champion swimmer. There are people there who swim to Alcatraz. I hate the water, and I'm the only person on the team that hates water, and I don't like to swim, although I'm a wonderful swimmer. Don't anybody worry about me. But so we wanted to honor you, and I can give this to you.
Definitely.
And
Okay. It's great honor. Thank you so much,
You're welcome.
Councilmember Agrimonte.
I think there may be people here too.
Yes, I let me to read.
She wants to say something.
Okay.
Okay, Holly.
Microphone.
Oh, the microphone.
So, oh, you're in the mic, oh, I
You're
can
a
be pretty
star,
loud.
It's for the recording.
Oh, okay. Thanks so much, City Council, and especially Madeline, for honoring me and all the Valley people who spent an afternoon being judges for our high school seniors in their projects. I can't remember when I first started combing through my email list looking for anyone interested in helping out the teachers, the schools, and the seniors. The feedback was so positive that each year thereafter more and more people signed up. The last year, there were around 300 judges, meaning about 4 people per classroom. But then, this is Sonoma. We rally and we help out where needed. Steve and I love this town, always have, always will. Thank you very much.
All right. All right. That is the reason it's mine a great honor to certify this day Holly Kyle Day, October the 5th, 2022.
Oh my goodness.
You know, this is as I said, Sonoma Splash finally and you know they've been working on this for 15 or more years. So we're so proud, and I would love for you to attend on the 16th if you're not out of town, and to be honored there as well. Yes. So this is to you, City of Sonoma Certificate of Recognition, Holly Kyle Day, October 5th. I, Jack Ding, Mayor of the City of Sonoma, do hereby proclaim October 5th, 2022 as Holly Kyle Day in the city. Your contributions to our community is recognized and much appreciated. Presented this 5th day of October 2022, Mayor Jack Ding. And I will do this for your audience.
That's great.
You're welcome. This belongs to you. I'm following up and make sure you come.
Can we get another one? Can we get another one? Perfect.
Would you all like to join us?
Sure.
Yeah, we still want to get the traditional, we also want to get the traditional one with everyone, but let's get the one, let's get this one, then we'll get another one. I know, I didn't want to. Okay, and then we can get one with the council, right here, and then we'll get one with the group from the podium, from the dice. You guys might want to move, we want to move back a little bit. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Here we go. 1, 2, okay, 3.
What a nice picture.
One more, perfect.
All right.
Wait, one more,
Great
one more.
photograph, yeah.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. And then if you guys can all go this way. We have a traditional picture when we do a Sonoma Celebrate. If everyone, Paul, Steve want to come this way, and everyone who came to celebrate you,
Oh,
looking this way, and we'll get a picture of the whole group.
oh, that's nice. That's great.
Does Jack and Sandra? They're going out.
Yes.
All of us?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Oh, here we go.
Yes, all right. Yeah, you're in the middle. Yeah, you're in the middle.
No, get the short people up. Also, I'm glad she didn't mess up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I can tell. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay.
Nice to see you.
So, I just want to mention something to our
Yes.
city manager.
Yes.
October, I believe it's October 16th from 1 to 4. They're going to have the opening, and I have to get the information, but the whole council is invited actually on it for a great purpose because, of course,
Yes.
the city has given $25,000 to Sonoma Splash. Our commitment is to have every child in the valley swim by the 3rd grade. So we're pretty excited about that, and so thank you. This is great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the council announcement in advance. That is so excited. Let's move to agenda number 4. Consent on the calendar. And all items listed on consent calendars are considered to be in the routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. Any items we need to pull out for detailed discussion? It's the time. Yes, Please.
I don't want to pull this item 4.2 on the trail system, but I did ask for some clarification, so Ariana's here to give clarification if anybody else on the council would like to know that, but we've got a much better map that shows where that work is going to be done, and so if you'd like to give us a quick explanation, it's a good project and we'd like to hear about it.
Do you want to throw it up, Rebecca? Yeah, so this is the map that you have in front of you that she's going to put up so I can see it while I'm talking. Just the map will be fine, yeah. And so this is the connector trail that's been in the works for a while. When we brought the Montini Preserve into the city's park system, they made kind of a one-way and back trail, the Valley of the Moon trail to the Two Goat Point, and it doesn't loop around, so you have to go out and back. And folks, instead of coming back, have started just kind of going down the hill, and they tend to walk through what's known as the conservation easement that was part of our agreement with Ag and Open Space when we purchased the property. So they're both violating our easement, and this trail that they're making is very steep and it's causing erosion. So for all of these reasons, we're going to make a little connector trail that's going to take the Valley of the Moon trail through the forested area and connect it to the Fire Road and then back to Holstein Hill Trail. So it kind of makes a loop in our system. And we've provided this contract that I have on the consent is to have the American Conservation Experience crews that came and helped us with the Overlook Trails last spring do this project for us, as well as they're going to work on the signage so that the kiosks at the entrances are not ADA compliant or anywhere very accessible at the moment. They're kind of steep, so they're going to do that work for us as well.
Oh, go ahead, Bob, you asked.
Okay.
So, Ariana, thank you so much. I think this is really important. Who manages the team?
Currently, we have Sonoma Ecology Center. So you guys let me execute a contract with them in June. So they started work on the permitting system with PCI is doing a CEQA addendum to do this work, and they've already started that work. And then they'll manage, John Aronson is the actual trail designer that will organize what the crew's doing. And so this is just for the actual crew labor to do the building.
So there was no other group that came forward to provide this
do the work?
service?
Because they're the American Conservation Experience, we can just sole source with them, and they're much more competitive pricing because of what they do.
Who is much more competitive?
Their conservation crew, they're youth volunteers that are organized through the ACE program, and they provide volunteer hours, and so we're just paying for kind of the program leads.
And didn't they do something on the Overlook
They
last
did the
year?
Overlook Trail last year, yeah. And so it's the same crew, that's kind of, well, the same leadership and crew, different volunteers.
Yeah, this is great.
That's
I,
great,
I,
yeah.
I like hiking that trail, and I haven't gone off the trail to do that, so I'm not doing that, but can't wait to do it legit. And I see it connects to the Overlook Trail in the same way,
Yes.
and so that'll be great.
So I have a question with respect to, I think it's Overlook. I think CAL FIRE has said they need some type of a way to get up there in case of a fire.
Right.
So where is that?
For the Overlook Trail, I'm not sure where CAL FIRE is with that. I would look over to Sue for that.
Well, I think they're sort of being blocked from actually discussing it.
Oh, I don't know.
So, I would just like,
I don't know anything about that.
yeah, yes, of course you don't. But so I just thought you should be aware that CAL FIRE has made that request.
Okay.
Just to clear it. So I don't know what kind of funds that needs, where maybe they have funds to be able to do it. But I just thought you should be aware of it. Okay, thank you. And thank you. It's a great job.
The other part of this project that isn't what this contract is for, but where it's connecting into the fire trail, we are going to upgrade a crossing for the swale there, and that was a request from CAL FIRE as well, so they can get.
Okay.
So I'm not sure about the Overlook Trail, but in terms of Montini, this would provide them better access into the middle of Montini if they need to use that for fire breaks.
Okay, so I just wanted to make you aware of it. Thanks.
And I assume that this was in the capital improvement budget we approved in June?
Yes.
So, okay. Yeah, no, this project looks great. And to be honest, I can't joined Councilwoman Lowe, I assumed the trail just continued. And so I'm glad that we're making it all legitimate at this point.
It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for your great work. Appreciate it. Any other item we needed to pour out for further discussion or verification? It's the time. I've no public. Yeah. I want to now open to the public. See any comments?
Hi, I'm Joanna Kemper, and I chaired the Overlook Trail Stewards for 8 years. And I wanted to let you know that when we did that rehab program on Overlook, we vetted 3 different groups for the work on it. And we chose ACE because they have a very good background, particularly with rock building. So we looked very closely at all the groups, and these people came up on top, and they were wonderful to work with. They went to budget. When they ran over budget, they gave us the money back. And they were wonderful to work with the city. They worked with the city very well, and they worked with us very well. So I just want to let you know that they're a solid contract to work with. And when you go up that Overlook Trail, as you know, you come to that dead stop because you're not supposed to go any further. So continuing this loop, it's going to be wonderful to have that a complete thing without being illegal. So I just want to support that group and what you're going to do, or we hope you're going to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julianne. Appreciate it. Any public comments from the Zoom, please?
Yes, we have Fred Olabach. Go ahead,
Great.
Fred.
Good evening, Mayor Ding and City Council. I hadn't intended to speak on this item, but Councilmember Agramonte mentioned the fire access to the Overlook Trail, and I recall after the 2017 fires that somehow bulldozers got into the Overlook Trail area and were just like driving willy-nilly over the hillside there. And after the fires, we were speaking with Public Works about how it would be great to have some kind of better plan than that, in the future. And so really the natural fire break for the Overlook Trail is right up at the top, which has access from the Shorenstein Vineyard, which the Overlook Trail has a good relationship with Dan's son to have access through the gate there. We supplied the materials for our first trail project up there, and there's also a gate along the side of Norbaum Road, so that I would think that would be probably the preferred plan for accessing the upper Overlook Trail would be to go through the Shorenstein Vineyard, but that would have to be worked out with Dan's son ahead of time and not wait till there's a fire. But I don't really have anything to say about the other project. It's great that that's happening, and like Councilmember Barnett, I have walked down that other way, and that's actually brings up an issue, is that part of that other way there is part of that fire road. So it'll be a challenge for the city to block off the fire road so that people won't keep going on the fire road and entering the conservation easement area. Because part of that loop there is on that fire road. So that will be probably a signage and enforcement issue that the city will have to deal with in the future, because Bill Montini will probably still see people coming through there if that fire road isn't closed somehow. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Fred. Any more? No. Okay. Thank you. All right. So in this way, we'd like to. I want to now close our public comments. I will bring back to City Council if any other item.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Agramonte,
Aye.
Councilmember Felder,
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Barnett,
Aye.
Mayor Ding,
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Agenda number 5, public hearing. Today, we don't have the public hearing. Agenda number 6, regular calendar. 6.1, discussion, consideration, and the possible action to provide direction to staff regarding recently approved Municipal Services Report, MSR, prepared by the Sonoma County Local Agency Formation Commission, LAFCO, for the city of the Sonoma. I would like to pass over to our city manager and the planning director, please.
I'm just going to let the planning director take over.
As it should be. Hi, good evening. David Storr, Planning Director. So our presentation tonight is brief. We have about 15 slides. Happy to go over some more in detail than others perhaps, but suffice it to say that just recently, this September the 7th, Sonoma LAFCO approved the city's MSR, Municipal Services Report. It's the first time we've had one done since 2006. And ostensibly they're to be done about every 5 years or so as jurisdictions are analyzed by LAFCOs with respect to sphere of influences and the like, again in concert with your general plan, that kind of a thing. The basics here with respect to LAFCO is they implement what is known as the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act of 2000. It was before just called the Cortese-Knox law until the Hertzberg amendments came in the year 2000, basically looking at the formation of municipalities, service areas, special districts, irrigation districts, fire districts, and sewer districts, and the like. And they also have the authority to, under the law, to form new cities, for example, to annex new pieces of territory to a city, even de-annex, if you will. But again, relating to the service or provision of government services. So one of the direction of the local laws that apply all across the state of California to promote orderly development, discourage urban sprawl, preserve ag and open space areas, and as importantly to provide for the efficient extension of government services. This was kind of an interesting slide for me to put together. In my 4 years here at the city, I've noticed that the roles of the commissioners doesn't change a whole lot, but one thing that's been important to me in my career is to always have a voice on as many boards as you can. And I haven't seen Sonoma have much of representation on this particular body, maybe because of our remote geography, but it may be time at some point in the near future to be a little bit more involved with LAFCO and the like. It's certainly a recommendation of mine to your city in the coming future. But there you can see the membership. Very typically throughout California, you can either have LAFCOs that are made up of 11 people, 9 people, 7. Typically, you'll have 2 members of the Board of Supervisors. You might even have a public member, a special district member, and maybe representatives shared amongst the cities. And that would be certainly the provision that I'm talking about right here, where you see the city membership representation. Anyway, as far as the MSR, the Municipal Service Report, and the contents therein, LAFCO commissions these, and because we had an application in on the southeast of town, commonly called the Doyle property that was about to be annexed, thought it was time to make that phone call to have an MSR prepared for us. It kind of updated the view of our city from 2006. Certainly a lot of time has passed since that initial report. I'll do a brief comparison a little bit later on, but again, when it comes to the MSR, there are certain things that need to be included in the MSR that describes the services of our city, and with respect to growth, population, disadvantaged unincorporated communities. I'll talk about that in a moment. Talking about the capacity of public services and areas where we can finance those. We talk about in the MSR about shared facilities, and also looking at structural operations. With respect to this particular MSR that we received as compared to the 2006, there were no actual recommendations in 2006, whereas in this MSR we have 4, and I'll talk about those in a few minutes. There were 23 determinations, or statements of fact, if you will, in 2006, whereas in this MSR that we received, there's 43. I've just given you 2. I will talk about one in just a moment because it was perplexing to me when I saw the draft, and it was still perplexing because the same language is in there. But for example, you see here it talks about our population. These are statements as determined by the independent contractor that looked at preparing the MSR. And when it comes to the MSR, by the way, the department heads are usually interviewed and asked about the services and provisions that we provide. And then they kind of synthesize that and look at from their own perspective. This particular consultant was out of the Sacramento area, and I knew him personally because he was on the Sacramento LEFCO about 20-odd years ago when I was working in that environment. The particular one that I wanted to bring attention to, again, we don't have to resolve them tonight, but we can certainly talk about why it says what it says. For example, there's section 3. Determination 3.2. It says vacancy rates in Sonoma are comparatively high compared to elsewhere in the county and the state, exacerbating a housing availability imbalance. Between 2014 and 2017, they doubled from 6% to 12%. Well, I'm not an economist, but I understand what vacancy rates are all about, and I could not quite figure out why this says why it says, other than that it's about the second housing market or some other phenomenon. But when you go north of 3%, things are a little bit skew-whiff when it comes to the market. Perhaps, Council Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I thought we had a presentation earlier this year during the housing element, and we talked about that very issue. And it was determined that that is second homes, basically. Yeah.
There is no other explanation for it. The problem with this document is no source. And also it's 5 years old as it is. So it's pre-COVID, pre-fires, and pre a lot of everything. And so I question as to why that determination was even made in the first place.
We're also losing population.
We have for the last 2 years, and that's why I put that one in here as 3.3. But as you go through this document, you can kind of pick it apart and try to figure out why it says some of the things that it says. But again, it is determinations by an independent party, and we have to kind of take that at its value anyway. So the 4 recommendations in the MSR, these were certainly in the draft that we received in March, but have been slightly modified. But at the end of the day, we have the 4. Number 1 talks about continued discussions with the county and other jurisdictions and agencies to talk about how to be more effective and efficient in providing services in the valley. That is an ongoing process, and our city manager has been a part of that along with myself on occasion. The second one talks about figuring out if we want to have two park areas, Maxwell Farms and Montini Preserve. And you'll see some maps a little bit later on that talk about whether we should go about amending our sphere of influence. Third one talks about annexations potentially in the Denmark area, the Four Corners, and the Harrington Drive areas, and I'll talk about those geographically. I've got some maps coming up. Then the last one is talking about engaging discussions regarding Traintown relative to that being a textbook, by definition, unincorporated island that's surrounded on all 4 sides by the city. So this particular map here shows you our city limits and our sphere of influence and our urban growth boundary. You can see the darker orange, if you will, is our city limits. The lighter yellowish color are areas that are outside of our city limits. If it's inside the blue lines, that's within the UGB and sphere of influence, which will go terminus, other than the Montini Preserve that we just spoke about, and that's about 60 acres, and you'll see that on the next slide. But going from, if Montini is at 12 o'clock, as you go down to about 3 o'clock, you see a piece there. You can certainly see the Bond Street property, the Corporation Yard, and then you'll see 2 locations, one either side of 5th, relative to Denmark on either side. And then as the bottom southeast corner, you'll see the Doyle property. That's about 3 acres there. You'll see Traintown right off of, on the east side of Broadway. And you can see the properties, I call them the Broadway Market, the Merlot properties, and then you'll see the Serafini Saponi property, and then the 2.5 acres south of it. Then, of course, as you get to about 7 o'clock on the clock there, you can see the Harrington area, and then as you wind up to about 9, 10 o'clock or whatever, you see the Maxwell Park area.
Right.
Sorry.
Hey, I have a question. And I did not know this. The Montini Preserve is not in the city limits,
That is correct, yeah.
yet we operate it, or?
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and so what I've done is I've identified.
Because we don't do that with Maxwell.
Correct.
Hmm.
So, in this MSR, it talks about maybe annexing or taking it out of our SOI, if you will, at some point. But here you can see I've put the acreages in there. When you add all of them up together, there's about 245 acres. And the next slide will kind of take those into a micro look. You can certainly see those boundary lines that I was just talking about. As you go from left to right, you'll see the Maxwell Park, you see Montini, then you see the east side, then you see the west side of Denmark. I didn't put in the east side of Denmark, but it's just across the road, kitty corner. You can kind of see there that we also have on the Doyle side, there's another piece of property, 0.6 of an acre, that's actually technically not in the city limits for one reason or another. In the middle of the bottom, you'll see Traintown, that's 4 parcels, assesses parcel numbers totaling 10 acres. To the south of the Four Corners area, you'll see the Serafini Zapponi property, that's 5 acres, and there's 2.5 acres just south of it. You can see this, the Broadway Market property, and then that's surrounded by an L-shaped property, and then 4 1-acre properties that are owned by Rich Merlo. To the far right on the bottom is the Harrington Road area.
I'm sorry, the what?
Harrington Road.
Oh, right, I know where that is. Okay.
Yeah. So at this point, staff recommends that as your planning advisory body, so to speak, the Planning Commission could review the 4 recommendations that are contained in the MSR and report to the City Council in the new year in concert with the budget preparation process, because certainly if there's an indication to annex properties, that would take some effort, planning effort that's probably not been budgeted for as far as staffing and the documents that are necessary in order to process any annexations, depending on the number of them. The city will likely have a new city manager and department head to spare any approved implementation measures to modify the sphere of influence if so directed. Examples of things for the Planning Commission, as we've talked about just briefly talk about the annexation of the 2 park areas, if there's a desire the city to do that. Also, whether there's an intention to annex Traintown or any of the Denmark, Four Corners, and the Harrington Road areas. And then also, again, to continue the discussions with those that we have been talking to over the years about the Sonoma Valley region and improving services there. This concludes my presentation. Happy to go into any more of the determinations or provide more detail. Thank you.
So, thank you. The Broadway Market, is there one owner there?
There is of the market, but surrounding it is a separate property owner.
Oh, okay.
And then one owner with the 4 1-acre parcels.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I actually do have another diagram I would like to show, because I thought of this as after late this afternoon. There's an image, Rebecca, on the G drive that it's a JPEG that I just put up there in the same location. I have a photograph from my wall from my iPhone that I imported because it shows the Springs area relative to our city limits, and I thought that was kind of helpful. There we go. So forgive the graphics. That is actually a hard copy with an iPhone dumped onto the screen there. So we've heard a lot recently. So if you can see there, I don't know how to do a laser. Is there a cursor? Yeah. Does this cursor show up? Do you see it? No, you don't see it. Oh, so you can see here the Maxwell Park area. You can see McDonald's on the corner right here. And you can see the outline of this boot, if you will, is not the best picture in the world, but it shows the boot part of the Springs specific plan. You've heard of that, and it goes way further north along Highway 12 than this picture. Maybe this is about the bottom third of the area, but it's the only portion that involves territory close to our city. And here you can see along here is Donald Street. You may have heard of that in the past. But as you can see here, even this area here, this little parcel right here is not in our city limits. It's a little bit of a quirk. I don't know why or understand why. But you can certainly see that if you brought in the Maxwell Park, then you have to say, how do we get this piece here in the corner and then these other homes in this area to make it an orderly and logical extension of our city. And certainly we do provide sewer and water and other services in this particular area, But the purpose of this picture was just to show you the spring-specific plan. And again, the spring-specific plan that's being processed at the county does not involve all of the other territory north of the boot, if you will, or just north of Donald and above. Wish I'd have thought of it in my PowerPoint, but it came to me this afternoon. Thank you.
And so you can't annex any property into the city that's not already in the sphere of influence.
It needs to be in your sphere
It
of
has to be
influence
in the
before
sphere
you
of
can annex it, yes.
You can apply for a sphere amendment and an annexation
At the same time.
simultaneously. Yeah.
A lot
And
of
the
people-
sphere is basically, I mean, you showed where they're small little areas, but it's basically coterminous with the
Right.
UGB, which is the city limits, basically.
For all
Yeah.
intents and purposes, the UGB
Yeah.
is your sphere of influence, yeah.
And so if you were to annex, you would be at the same time amending the UGB? No.
No, the UGB would have to be amended by the voters, so we try to do everything that's inside the sphere of influence or UGB. Where they're not coterminous, you'd have to amend the UGB, but I don't know whether that's going to be something that we'd want to take on.
Meaning if we want it, like, for example, if we want to extend the sphere of influence to even include just Donald, we would have to modify the UGB,
I believe so.
like through an election.
Yeah.
I'm asking the
Yeah,
question.
I mean, it may be that you could, I mean, the sphere of influence is determined by LAFCO,
The UGB is
That
not.
is-
but the
So-
UGB is determined by the voters.
Right.
Voters.
Voters, right?
Yeah. And
And I think as a policy matter, LAFCO does not like to extend spheres beyond a city's urban growth boundary if they had adopted one. So it's unlikely that a LAFCO would extend the sphere outside of the urban growth boundary unless that boundary was first amended by the voters. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, so play along with me for a little bit on this one. There's a lot of talk about extending the city limits into the Springs and making one Sonoma. Something that I'm partial to in many ways. So what would be the process? Because people want to know, what would be the process of something like that?
So if I may, Councilmember Lowe, ask a question before I answer. Where is the Springs? And I'm being a little bit facetious
Right.
about it because I've talked to a lot of people. I think I was here about a week before I started talking to people who wanted to have us annex or even start, incorporate themselves or become the city of North Sonoma. Tongue in cheek. The point being is, I don't know where the Springs is. I can tell you where the specific plan is.
Well,
the
let's
county.
just for for fun, let's just,
Say it's everything that we see on the map.
Yeah, let's-
even
yeah.
outside the red area.
because
let's say.
honestly, I'm just really looking for process,
Sure.
not necessarily specific
territory.
geography at this point.
Well, specific geography will play a part because in that process we would have to do some analysis, of course, not the least of which is the environmental. But the process is actually contained in our municipal code, and I believe it's Title 7 of our municipal code, and it talks about annexation. So 7.02 talks about the process where it goes to the planning commission. So let me back up. The process of annexation in our municipal code really deals with respect to private development wanting to annex for the purpose of adding houses, subdivisions, and the like. Doesn't really look to the issue of whether a jurisdiction wants to add to itself. But it's basically the same process where our planning commission will take an application in. It will determine a couple of things. Number one, to approve it, to deny it, at which point it could be appealed to the city council, or it forwards a recommendation to be annexed versus one with conditions, and then it would go to your council. The council would look at it, whether it's either on appeal or whether it's just a recommendation from the commission, and then you would adopt a resolution authorizing the application to LAFCO to do an annexation, at which point they would then be the people that would do the environmental work, unless in an application sense, if it's a private developer, we'd have them carry the cost of the environmental work. But in the case of the city, we'd be on the hook for that ourselves. So it does take a process, and it can be done, certainly.
So it's not dissimilar to Doyle, for example. Let's just throw that out there for an example. We don't have any proposal at the moment, but should we have something like that, which was a private development proposal, that the annexation of the Springs-specific plan area would be similar in process. Would it take a vote of the people?
No, this would be something that an application would come to your council to authorize. We'd have to pre-zone it. It's not pre-zoned. That would be an action concurrent with an application to LAFCO to annex. But you as a city council would provide that direction to me to apply to LAFCO on your behalf, or the director.
Ruderman was going to say something as well, no?
I'm just trying to get clarification. Are we talking about an annexation of territory that is currently outside the sphere?
This would be at this point, yes. So we'd have to do a concurrent sphere amendment.
From what I understand, we would have to have an election from the city voters to expand the UGB, but not from the Springs.
Correct.
So that's the electoral part.
Yeah.
So the electoral part would be the expansion of the UGB. The municipal part would be the council and taking it to LAFCO for, and so what role, does LAFCO have the ability to deny or our application to annex?
Yes, just with a private development, they can do that, but obviously there's findings. If it's generally if it's consistent with Cortese, Knott's, Hertzberg and their own policies, they will approve.
The one thing that is important to know is that when you have an annexation of that's that large, there is the opportunity for a protest proceeding.
Mm-hmm.
So in normal annexations, city annexations, the threshold is 25. If you get 25% of the registered voters or 25% of the landowners that combined own 25% of the assessed value in the potential annexation area, that would force an election on the annexation. If you reach 50% threshold, then that stops the annexation, and the city would have to wait a year before it applied again to LAFCO.
So I understood it's not if we want them, it's if they want us. And that's what you were just explaining.
For the most part, when you have a large area like this, and that's why I was asking the questions, it's generally difficult to get the votes that are needed, unless there's some very serious service problem. For example, police are not showing up, it takes them an hour. So these residents want better service times, response times, whether it's fire or police, or the sewer's broken. There's usually a compelling reason for why they're knocking on the door, trying to get annexed. I don't know that that's the case here in the Springs. I don't have people calling me every day saying we want to be a part of the city. I'm sure it happens. There's people out there. Certainly those on Donald are concerned. At least some of them near the vacant land anyway. But there are not a lot of people saying we've got services that they're not where they should be and we want to be annexed.
Well, I have heard it. It may not be in the exact examples that you gave, but I have heard residents say that they would prefer to come to the city council than to go up to Santa Rosa and deal with the Board of Supervisors on issues that affect their area. I think that also, at least this council has demonstrated that we care a lot about our adjacent neighbors. One example was the Picasso timeshare ordinance that we passed, that there's a lot of residents outside the city limits who wish that specifically applied to them and their neighborhoods. They're seeing the impact. So whether it might not be services directly, but it might be policies that they identify with more. And honestly, if you had to draw a city right now and create it, it would look like we were excluding half of our population to draw the city of Sonoma in its current boundaries. And I think there's just a general feeling that, and I could be wrong, but at least that's my sense, that there's a general feeling that we are one valley, certainly one school district, and that, it would make sense if people could, come to us with their issues. You certainly notice it especially in election season, because people come up all the time and say, I can't vote I can't vote in this, and they don't have a representative. And I think that that's a concern to a lot of people. We are a country founded on democracy, and when you have people who feel that, even though they do have a representative on the Board of Supervisors, they'd like someone, more directly that they could deal with. So I think this discussion will go on. I mean, I really appreciate your report today. It was enlightening and very clear. Some of those properties, I think, are a little bit more common sense than others. Others are going to be fraught with problems and, probably not worth going there. But there are some that seem to make a lot of sense. So, but I think that the bigger discussion at some point has to be had in terms of what exactly is the Sonoma Valley, what exactly is the city of Sonoma, and of course, expanding services to a whole lot of people that currently are not part of our tax base is an impact, but there are also, abilities to get a lot of tax base that currently is going to the county that could be staying in the valley, mainly the TOT tax from the Sonoma Mission Inn.
Could I just pick up on
Yes.
a comment you
Yeah.
made, Councilmember Lowe? In my experience, I helped the cities of Citrus Heights, Rancho, and Elk Grove incorporate, and in Sacramento County, that was their very issue. Was the lack of they were not enfranchised. The disenfranchised. Yeah, sorry, mind blank. It was the vote that was important to them because they had one member of the Board of Supervisors where they could have 5 council members to go to. This was before some of them went to districting, but the point being is not lost in that it was really having a voice. And because we're so far away from Sacramento, Santa Rosa, I think that point speaks to that. The concern for the city to look forward to, though, is, let's say, for example, we had a magic wand and they wanted 100% all to come in, wherever the geography is for the Springs. We would be, then having to do the fiscal analysis and also talking about a tax sharing agreement because in the case of Sac County and Citrus Heights, they didn't want to give up that Sunrise Mall in the area there. And when you're talking about just bringing in the homes, then you're looking at the tax base and whether it's going to be a drain on the city. We all know, having driven out there into the area that we're talking about, that there's sidewalks, there's improvements, there's roads, that we're going to be carrying the cost on that. We have a policy in the findings that we have in our annexation policy that says that improvements will be brought up to city standard at the time of annexation. Of course, again, this is talking about a private developer that wants to bring in. But then the question is, does that same policy apply to us when we want to bring some property in ourselves?
And I think that, and that's been brought up, and a lot of people say, well, I kind of like the sort of ruralness of the hillside where I live in the Springs, and it's like I don't see any reason why when you zone it that can't be. We have different kinds of zones within our city, and I don't. At least my intent is not to make everything look exactly like the 8th Street to 8th Street, Napa to Napa grid that we have here. I mean, it's nice to have things that look a little bit different, and everybody likes different things. So I find no problem with that, and conforming to a rigid standard. And I think a city should be flexible in terms of its residents and the requirements and so forth within safety standards. We're not running an HOA. We're running a city, and a city is diverse. So anyway, I think it's going to be a longer discussion, probably years in the discussion, but it's, it keeps, people ask about it. I would say it's one of the most common questions I get asked.
Yeah.
And
I find that interesting. Nobody has ever spoken to me about that.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people in the Springs. They don't want to be part of us, but maybe I talk to different people.
Well,
but
this-
that's okay. It's America.
Yeah,
That's
it is
the way
America.
This issue I haven't heard in many, many years. And we have the difficulties from the, the legal side. But actually, I don't think that if we really really want to do it, yeah, I think it's possible. The last year, and the county supervisor has approved nearly $300,000. That is the budget for this kind of annexation analysis. So I would like to think maybe we can use part of this money. We do the feasibility study, and then we can. I'm not sure we can have an in-house this kind of the service, or we need to hire an outside consulting, and see and how many people they are interested, how many people they are not, what kind of interest, what kind of financial impact, and economic impact, short term and the long term, and how much tax additional we can collect it, and how much we need to pay them more. For example, right now in the Springs area we didn't see any sidewalk, but within the city limit, and it is required with the sidewalk, right, or and the lamps, or I don't know. So we needed to do the more and the scientific work, see what's going on, what is the really impact. Definitely from the city, and needed to provide more services. Actually, we are doing the more services for example, our homeless, the shelters here in the city. But we provide an 80% of the services to the outside and the city limit. So all different kind of thing. I'm wondering if you have previous experience and see just around the income and expenses, profit and loss statement, and seeing how much income you can get. Why, if we can run it better, why we leave this money to the county? We want to help in Sonoma.
When it comes to the fiscal analysis, there will be a study on that for sure. And clearly, there's an existing tax sharing agreement. Counties will be loath to give up some of the TOT. They'd be more than happy to give you all the residential that they have.
Yeah.
So say hello to a long, protracted negotiation. If I can just make a parting comment, or at least a recommendation, or things that I took out of this MSR, two things with respect to annexations. Number one, I have received questions and concerns and interest from the council on the Four Corners area. The extension, the orderly and logical extension of sewer and water to those properties south of Napa Leveroni makes sense to me. Mr. Merlo, the 4 1-acre properties, 20 units to the acre. There's housing on its way there, folks, if we could look to that at some point in the future. Problem is, then, if you only do that in the Broadway market, then you've got a little zigzag going. It makes sense to bring that and the property around it into it, along with the 4 Merlo sites on the west side. And then at the same time, the council, Councilmember Agramonte will remember the Zapponi Serafini site, the 5 acres that went on the market, and there was a discussion, a short one at the city council level, whether we had any interest in purchasing that with the Housing Trust Fund. There was not at that time. That to me makes sense to bring that in with the Merlo sites at the same time, and cleaning up the Doyle and that little 0.6 of an acre piece that I showed you that was also not in the city limits on the north side of Napa. That makes sense to me to bring that in. That's part one of the two things that I wanted to say. And then probably most importantly to me would be addressing the Traintown issue. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say thou must do it. This is an island, and the legislature has created a streamlined process to rid jurisdictions of islands. You cannot create one if you wanted to, but this is a remnant of going back to the 60s. And so I'm not saying you do one versus the other. I'm just saying those are the take-homes that I got, that those are issues that should be addressed in that order. Going to Harrington, I'm not so much. Denmark, possibly too, because I have received interest on the west side of Fifth of bringing those Denmark properties in, but not all of the properties want to come in. And so you kind of have to kind of balance that out and then say, well, notwithstanding what Mr. Storr has just said, does it make sense to do the Montini Preserve and get that in the city limits? Probably. Sphere of amendment? Probably. Is it doing any harm not being in our city limits? Probably not. And so it's just a matter of cleaning up borders, and that's exactly what LAFCO is about, is trying to create order amongst these various interests, if you will.
Possibly we could leave the pickleball part of Denmark to its own area, because it's huge controversy.
Yeah.
No pickleballs.
I have a couple questions. The first, just, I mean, I sort of already brought it up, but if the Montini Preserve, I mean, was there an agreement? I mean, do we know why we operate it and maintain it if it's not in the city limits? I mean, that just makes, I mean,
Yeah, there was an agreement when it was, yeah. It's not our property, but yeah.
yeah, I mean, to me, that makes sense to bring it into the city limits.
So it was a part of the trust? It was part,
That
okay.
was the agreement, yes, yeah.
And yeah, trust. And also, when we just discuss about an SOI, and also mention UGB, when 2 years ago when we worked on the UGB, I feels like I never see any UGB amendment in the campaign, because this is a big project. We spend $100,000 put to the voters and the measure ballot and working on this in more than 1 year. If we want to make an amendment for this piece of the Montini, the preserve, I'm wondering if we can find any exemption or.
Well, that's in the SOI, right? The Montini?
Yeah, just only the one Montini preserve that piece without in the SOI.
It's not in the
It's
sphere of
not.
influence?
Yeah. It's not in UGB. Sorry, it's not in
it's
UGB.
not in the UGB.
Yeah, it's not in. It's
Oh,
the
so we would-
SOI, but it's not in UGB.
Okay, so that's a great point.
That
Yeah,
is
we-
a great point.
Yeah.
Yes, SOI. It's
But
the
if it's not
yellow,
in the UGB,
yeah,
can
light
we
to-
annex, I don't
light
think
to
we can
yellow.
annex it without
Yeah.
having an election, right?
Well, but isn't the UGB, it just limits urban development, and
Right.
it exempts parks.
In an
So
open
if you
space.
Yeah, that's what I-
dedicate it, as open space, then perhaps it would be
Or-
okay under the UGB.
Yeah, because it's not
Yes.
under any circumstance, I mean, I think it's in perpetuity that's an open space trust, so it's not, but that, I think it would be important to get an attorney's opinion on that before we move forward, because, I mean,
Yeah.
people are, the urban growth boundary was resoundingly passed by the voters, and I think it's important to maintain the integrity of what the voters told us.
And also, by the way, also in the open space, the separator, also we have the same characteristics like the UGB. Gotta protect and the development and the strictly restricted.
And the Maxwell Park is inside of sphere of influence and inside the UGB.
Yeah,
The,
those are no
the,
any
the
issue.
Montini is the opposite. It's
Yeah,
in the sphere of
opposite.
influence and not the UGB.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would check on that.
And of course, Maxwell, the shopping center, is within the city limits.
Correct.
Much to the dismay of some people back in the day.
Right.
But I think they've gotten over it, I hope.
Yeah, so I would obviously check on Montini, and then I guess what would the point of bringing in Maxwell be? If we're, I mean, because that's a lot of land to maintain.
Yeah.
So I mean, I wouldn't support that.
Mike's
Without
looking for
any-
things to do, yeah.
What?
Mike's looking for things to do.
Okay. Well,
Fifth Street West, Mike, Fifth Street West.
in terms of obviously we sort of talked about looking at parts of the springs sort of down the road, and I agree with Councilwoman Lowe. This would be a long process, but this is one community, and if our goal is to deliver municipal services, I mean that's the goal of the MSR, and to deliver services to the people of the valley in the most efficient way possible, I think we should look at that. I guess my question is, if they just did the spring specific plan in terms of like environmental review, I'm sure there's just a lot of recent updated data. Is there any way to sort of leverage that? I mean, you said there would have to be sort of environmental review to even start the process.
They've done an EIR, but again, it's just for a very specific piece of targeted properties on the east and west side of Highway 12. It goes, I mean,
Yeah.
1 or 2 properties, 3 properties, 4 properties. Beyond that, to Arnold, no. It's not part of it. And so that's why they've been very specific about going as far north as they do on the leg of the boot, if you will, to capture the fiscal.
Bless you.
Bless you. To capture the revenue that's coming from the commercial properties.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And then my final question is about the Four Corners area. Would that be similar, is your recommendation similar to the Doyle, where we would bring that into the city with projects proposed, or would you just recommend bringing that in?
So let's just talk Doyle for a second, and then I'll translate that over. I had a concern that we were just going to be looking myopically at the Doyle. I wanted to bring in the 0.6 acres that's just further to the west of it to square that off, while at the same time, with having interest from Mr. Merlot, it was let's just do the whole thing, and that would incorporate going around the Broadway market and bring it all in the Four Corners plus the Doyle piece.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me, but I know with Doyle, they had a proposed project, so with Merlot and the
So you can do a
Serafini property.
Yeah, you can do a project level. That's what that would have been, but it
Yeah.
would have been a policy level on the other stuff. We would have to figure out the sequel on that, but you can clearly do that. I think without there being any project on it, you could do a policy level EIR.
Would
A
we
program EIR rather than a project.
would we get credit for the RENA numbers if we bring it in before?
We will have to have a discussion. There's a process for that baked into.
Because isn't the county using that for their RENA numbers?
Correct. Yes.
Right. So if we brought it in and then
See,
they
it's
developed.
another reason that counties
Well, no,
do
I know
theirs.
exactly. So if we brought it in first and then a project was developed there, would we get the credit?
Yeah, we'd have a discussion with the county about how those will be shared or transferred from one to the other. Transfers are actually pretty common.
All right, thank you.
Remember, we've got an 8-year cycle to do that.
Interesting.
Are there any properties within the sphere that are, could be purchased by the city? I know you went back and talked about a previous parcel that it didn't happen. Are there any that you've identified within the sphere that are possibly properties that the city or, maybe close to that city could purchase in order to do a project?
I think the Doyle property is a prime example. It's basically vacant for the most part. But clearly there's
Transit issues there, yeah.
You've got transportation issues, you've got the corner there, and you've got some neighborhood issues, and that's what
Right,
basically
right.
kiboshed the project. I think if the Zapponi Serafini site wasn't quite so expensive, that would be a good project or a good piece of property, and then the 2.5 acres south of it would be a good piece as well. I'm not quite sure how much we've got in our housing trust fund to come close to that, Bill.
Yeah, but we don't need all of it, right? I mean, couldn't we just put some money? I mean, I know mortgage rates are very, going up and very high right now. But why would we need? Like, let's say it costs $4 million. Couldn't we just finance it?
Certainly.
Yeah.
There's ways to do that. I wouldn't just do the 5 acres of the Zapponi Serafini. I'd bring the 2.5 south of it as well.
Yeah.
It makes more sense to be on. The larger the site, the better options you have. And clearly, we know that Burbank was interested in looking at that, putting an offer in on it. They didn't for one reason or another. They were also looking at a site east of Broadway, south of Napa, that was outside the city limits, outside the sphere of influence, and outside the UGB. But something like that would be something that would be useful.
Yeah, that would definitely be useful, and I think, we should be aggressive as to get money into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and other funds in order to be able to do that, not just to meet the RENA numbers, but to meet the needs of our town.
If I can just
Regardless
add
of whether or not they, it goes on a chart somewhere. I mean, the person, we need it.
Yeah, as I just mentioned, we have an 8-year cycle. Were it not for the property, the Saha project, we would not have met our low and very low numbers. And so I think with an eye towards a purchase, whether it's the Zapponi Serafini or something like that, again, the Saha project is not very large, but we pack some density in there, enough to meet our arena. We have a big arena now, and so the question is, how are we going to do that over the next 8 years to get those 2 particular income categories satisfied?
I have a question. If the city used the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to acquire an existing apartment building and then deed restricted units, even though they currently exist, does that count towards RENA? It doesn't, okay.
You'd be able to get the yeah, it's basically new units.
All right. So if I would like to see if any updates from the town, the Twin Town, because a couple of the months ago we have issues, meetings, the people misunderstanding. If any comments for the owner, Frank Roberts, right? If any. Oh, Robert Frank.
Mr. Robert Frank, yeah.
Robert Frank.
I do know he was in attendance at the LAFCO hearing, and the language in the draft was modified to what you see today with respect to Traintown. But again, the legislature has spoken with respect to the elimination of islands wherever you can. I haven't spoken to Mr. Frank in the last couple of months.
Okay. All right. Yes. Let me bring this to the public for comments. Looks like here and no. Oh my.
Who's jumping up?
Yeah, maybe we'll look at Zoom. The Fred maybe should be there, right?
We're actually going to bring in James
Okay.
McFadden first.
All right, Jim, it's your turn.
Here we go. Evening. My name is Jim McFadden, McFadden. I've lived in the Sonoma Valley, mainly in the Springs, since 1975. And for the last 32 years, my wife and I have lived at 17901 Riverside Drive in Boys Hot Springs. I'm speaking tonight for the Sonoma Valley Housing Group. We are very pleased that the county's LAFCO is recommending that the city of Sonoma consider annexing additional urbanized and developed areas in the valley. This has been a long time coming, but we are glad that it's now on the agenda, at least for a discussion. We remember that Mayor Logan Harvey supported annexing the Springs, and that after growing up in Sonoma, he said that it wasn't until he ran for city council that he learned that the Springs wasn't already part of the city. We think that, like him, a lot of people in the Sonoma Valley don't know that the whole community isn't part of the city. In fact, when you look around the county, Sonoma is the only city that does not include its lower income neighborhoods. Santa Rosa took in Roseland 5 years ago. Only Sonoma has left the greater part of its urban area out in the cold in the unincorporated county. 2/3 of the community lives outside the city limits. Our labor and our purchases contribute to city revenues, but we get no benefit from that. As well, we really have no political representation. Folks who live in the city get to vote for 5 city council members. We get to vote for only 1 of the 5 county supervisors, and the wealthier residents of the city and eastern Santa Rosa outvote us in those elections. So it's no secret that the city of Sonoma, as currently defined, is largely white and wealthy, while El Verano and the Springs have a much healthier mix of races and incomes. For years, my wife and I in Boys Hot Springs have considered ourselves blessed to be living among our white and Latino neighbors. It's the kind of environment where you want to bring up kids. We think that annexing the Springs is the right thing to do, and we hope that the City Council will take steps to start the process. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next, we'll be bringing in Fred Allebach.
Hi, Fred. It's your turn.
Give him just 1 second. There we go.
Okay, I just unmuted. Thank you. I would like to second what Jim had to say, and I'd like to speak to the LAFCO MSR recommendation number 1 of what I take to mean annexing the Springs. Um, and it is the only area in the county besides Moreland at this point where you have your low-income people of color segregated in the unincorporated area outside of the city boundaries. So I think that this is a pattern that needs to be addressed, and that's why LAFCO brought it up. This also links with affirmatively furthering fair housing and the city and the county housing elements. And if you look at Census Tract 150305, which is basically Roseland Jr. in the Springs, you have a terrible representation of lower economic and socioeconomic indicators there, contrasted with much higher socioeconomic indicators on Sonoma's east side. So we can see that there's valley-level segregation between the unincorporated and incorporated area, and the housing elements are supposed to address this. And this is a great opportunity with this MSR here and the LAFCO recommendation to link the affirmatively furthering fair housing with the rationale and justification for annexation. It's not that the property owners want it or what the economic benefits will be, but that it's not right to have a municipality where you have this kind of segregation, and that can be rectified through this LAFCO process and through annexation. So I think that the real justification and basis for this is representation, proper representation, and affirmatively furthering fair housing and equity. Let's see. So I think, yeah, okay, and this was also a council goal in 2021 to bring this up, and I know there was a lot of things going on that maybe got in the way of that. But I think at the end of the day, when you look at examples of places where a wealthier, more benefit-rich area was under pressure to annex a poorer neighbor, you have East Germany and West Germany. West Germany knew that they were going to bear some costs, but these were their people, and they couldn't have their same people and their same family living like second-class citizens when they had all the benefits. So they decided to make that sacrifice and they make it work. And so I think that the city needs to take care of this Roseland example here in Sonoma Valley, and really, and the way the flow chart decision works here is that you decide that you want to do it and then make it work. And so that's my position. I think it's a great idea, and I'm really glad that you all are talking about it. And I sent a comment with some backup materials for the council to read, so I hope you have a chance to look at my public comment that gives my justifications for this. And I guess that's about it for now. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Fred. Any more? All right, thank you. Let me close the public comments. You can talk more. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just get a clarification. It's my understanding that LAFCO did not have anything in its recommendations for annexing the Springs. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, I mean, this is where we've expanded the discussion to possibly considering it, but it's not an integral part of the LAFCO recommendation.
The recommendation is very broad, and it says it should look at organizational and government efficiency within the Sonoma Valley area.
So you do have a general phrase, but not anything about the Springs in particular. Okay.
Yes.
And just to follow up on that and some of the public comment, this was a council goal from, I believe, 2021 through 2022 to look at how we, in partnership with the county, deliver municipal services to the valley and sort of start to look at valley-wide governance. And so, and this is something that was also important to former Mayor Harvey. And so he and I were on a committee for a while looking at this, and then Councilwoman Agramonte joined. And so over the last year, we've had quite a few Zoom meetings. Sue and David have been to a few with the county about this issue. And so this is something that I think this city council and perhaps future city councils will continue to talk about, but I think we also need to realize this will be a difficult process. But there are other things we can do in the short term, and I think this is what the MSR is recommending. This is something that, as Councilwoman Lowe said earlier, and I agree with her 100%, if you were starting the Sonoma Valley from scratch, you would never draw our jurisdictional boundaries the way they're drawn. We are one community from basically, we're one valley, we're one community. And so they talked about this in the late 60s. They talked about this there was an election in the 70s. They've talked about this in the 90s. This comes up every 10 years because it just makes no sense. And so hopefully at some point we will get there. But in the late 60s, the Rotary Club sponsored something with the Chamber of Commerce. They did this big report that was in the Index Tribune, and they basically made a lot of recommendations back then on how to get there, and we've basically done a lot of it. Consolidate fire services. We've consolidated police services, and we have a city police department with the sheriff. We have. We've consolidated, I believe, the sewer, like it's the sanitation district. Obviously the library district is the county, or we have a hospital district. We've consolidated everything, basically, except for, Parks and Rec, planning, and water. And so I think one thing we should start to look at over the next few years, and I know it's difficult, I don't know if it makes sense or not, but, our water system, with the Valley of the Moon, our city water, and I know that we have a lot of contractors from Valley of the Moon right now. I think it would be just from an efficiency standpoint. I think we could start looking at that. But to ultimately even get to the point, and we talked about this earlier, annexing, and again, I don't know when it became the Springs. I always thought it was like Boy Springs and Fetters Springs, but at some point it became the Springs. But to annex the Springs, the city of Sonoma voters will have to extend the sphere of influence in the UGB. And so I actually agree with public comment, and obviously the city council would probably have to initiate a process, but the people that they're going to have to appeal to are not the five of us, it's the city of Sonoma voters. And you're going to have to make a good argument to city of Sonoma voters why they want to expand the city, and what the benefits for them would be. And in my view, there would be a lot of benefits. But those are going to be the people that, at least through 2040, are going to make that decision. But in general, I really appreciate this report, and I learned a lot, and I thank you for requesting it. I can't believe it hasn't been done since 2006. And then one last thing, I agree. I do think the city and the valley needs more representation on the LAFCO board. Obviously our supervisor's on there, but the one thing that we do have as sort of like a shadow influence, I guess, is Mark Bramfett is a resident of the valley, and he's our executive director, so his involvement.
He doesn't live in the city limits.
In the
Correct.
Springs.
Yeah, he lives just sort of in that, yes,
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And he's a wealth of information about this process, so.
On that point, though, I think the city would be well positioned to be aware of the rotational basis amongst the cities to say, wait a minute, time for us to be a part of the community.
Yeah, there's supposed to be a mayor's committee of all the mayors within this county that make the decision regarding rotations.
Yeah. We actually, all of the council actually should have received an email recently from Kevin Patterson, the city clerk from Cotati. And I was just looking at it, and one of the things that are going to be up are 2 seats and an alternate for the LAFCO board. So that's something that they're going to be considering at the meeting.
It's long term, yeah. We definitely.
Okay, I don't volunteer for a lot, but I'd like to volunteer for that.
Then see me and we can talk about a letter of interest that has to be submitted.
I would be interested, deferring, of course, to Mr. Mayor, but.
Yeah, at least, yeah. Either one of us, we cannot missing in the organization.
I think that we should definitely say, that we have an intent. We don't need to put a name to it at this point because, again, I would defer to our mayor. But this is a big issue. I really appreciate Vice Mayor Barnett's comments regarding sort of the process and the things that we've got in place. And, it's not easy. It's not going to be easy, but I think that it's well worth discussing, and it's well worth putting in the time to at least run the traps on it and see where we're at, because we are one valley, and we should act like it, and we should conform to our the sentiments of the people. And if we can make it work, it's all going to get down to probably dollars and cents. Everything does, but yeah, I think it's worth it's worth pursuing.
Also, I think we can put this as a project. Again, that we, if not possible, we can apply for some of the fund from the county. I remember there's no $250 more $1,000 that is exactly for Sonoma Valley annexation, and actually it's not using annexation. They how to provide the local service to residents more effectively, more efficiently. So that is right. Yeah. So we don't need any additional fund to do this kind of research. It is difficult, but if we start it, and then we can follow.
The staff recommendation tonight would be to have your council direct the planning commission to begin at the beginning of the year to look at the 4 recommendations and provide some direction to your or their recommendations to your council, the new council at the time, and then we would begin that process. So
Yeah.
That seems reasonable.
Yes,
If we
that's
need a motion,
reasonable.
I'll make a motion that we
Yeah.
adopt the recommendation.
Yeah. That's right. No, she no.
We adopt the recommendation to refer it to the planning
Yeah.
commission.
Yes.
Okay. Thought you were moving ahead out of the agenda.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Agramonte,
Yes.
Councilmember Felder,
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Barnett,
Aye.
Mayor Ding.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
All right. So
I would imagine that even without a motion, the planning commission could take this up, but I think it's nice to make it formalized and allow, I just kind of.
because then if we request for some study and do some analysis for the Springs area next to the city is not on the agenda. So how we want to propose
I think
another time
It
to.
was on the
I think that the recommended action was part of the staff report. So
Yeah,
that
no, it was on
has
the
been-
agenda.
So
Or,
the
I mean,
number-
yeah.
Which was direct
Yes.
the planning commission to look into the MSR's recommendations.
But what I suggest is maybe we can then start it, specifically. We can start it. We have the time frame, and applying for the fund because this is need the money.
But isn't this, was brought up by the vice mayor that this is part of our goals already?
Okay.
So it seems like we're just implementing our goals at this point, that this is the only thing that specific to this document needed referral to the committee. But I think our overarching goals, we can still do what you're suggesting without anything else. Am I
Great.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, let's move on. So the agenda number 7. Council members' report and the comments. I need a meeting.
I just have a comment. I was approached by several people just to note that today is a religious high holiday, a Jewish holiday, and that our policies somehow were not able to change the meeting date. And I'd like to, in the future, discuss that, because this is a very high holiday for those of the Jewish religion. They fast for the entire day and do not do any work, and we're unable to attend this meeting. So I'd like to look at that in the future. My goal is always to be inclusive and to give people every possible avenue to come forward, not to make it more difficult. So I'd like to look at that policy with council's blessings on that. Pardon the word blessings. Although Happy New Year's to everyone. And then also just to say that it is today's Clean Air Day. And thank you, Mayor Ding, for your comments in the paper today. And I hope we'll all embrace the goals of clean air. So Happy New Year and clean the air. Thank you.
Thank you. If any reports? And
I just wanted to say I support Councilwoman Lowe's,
Mhm.
what she said about looking at being able to change calendar dates for specific. Yeah, absolutely.
that is right. Especially for our communities, really, really, they spend the time and effort and energy to support the city council and each project. They really appreciate it. They spend a lot of the time and concerns. We need to encourage them. And although maybe just a small part of the residents, but definitely, and we should try our best representing all. And also, I may and you sealed with the Book of the Life today. Thank you. And then I have the report. Yesterday I was invited by Governor Gavin Newsom's office, attending the meeting. It's not in Sacramento, in San Francisco, and state in the building, and talk about that is a roundtable regarding infrastructure investment roundtable, and the governor named the former LA mayor, that is Antonio Villarreal, yes. It's the first time for me to meet, just like a movie star. And Gavin Newsom named him to talk with each and the local and the leadership how we can spend and part of the $1.3 trillion and recently passed by the Congress. So we mentioned about and the Highway 37, because I don't know how they choose a representative. And we are luckily the Sonoma City selected by them, just only me representing the whole and the small cities. And the rest of the three people, two supervisors from Marin County. One is the Sausalito's the vice mayor. So the four of us, we have the very detailed the discussion. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, exciting. Yeah, so I feel very lucky that we are chosen by them. Yeah, and I do my best to try to represent us and give them all our voices. I said I heard about Highway 37 and should using the $5 billion. So Susan Gorin mentioned, but I said I'm not sure. Right now, the labor cost and material cost is going up again and again. I said when we started, maybe later, and 5 million, maybe 5 billion, or then 10 billion or 20 billion, and then so that is one thing. And also we talked about the broadband. And when we consider about infrastructure investment, always a long-term investment. But it looks like this money, $1.3 trillion for all over the country. California probably we can get $50 billion. But I look at the $15 billion on the Highway 37 need. I don't know.
And Mr. Mayor, it's not just Sonoma.
Yeah.
It's Napa. Solano.
Yeah, 4 counties. Yeah.
Yes, it's a lot of counties. They've been working on it for years. So it's just got to be resolved.
There's a short-term
Yeah, it's also
plan,
the short-term plan.
and then there's a long-term plan.
Yeah.
And the Sonoma County Transportation Authority, on which I am a member, I spoke to the executive director actually this week about that, because there are, to get money from the federal government, there are some people just want to do the long-term plan, and of course that sounds great, but we need to do something right now, and I believe that we can do both. We can plan for the long term and also do something in the immediate term.
Yeah.
And this is, around Skaggs Island. But, as part of committee reports, I suppose this is, my statement would be in that context, that they are looking at a short term as well as a long term. And I think we need both,
Yeah,
know.
we need both.
Yeah, the sea
What is
rise
the short
alone.
term?
The short term has to do with the expansion, where it goes down to one lane as we turn
Yes.
into,
Yeah.
so it's to keep it 2 lanes in that next section.
And also we discuss about the partnership with the private sectors. Also that works because government is sometimes really hard to move forward. That is my report. The next agenda item is the report from the city manager.
Mayor Ding and city council members, Police Chief Orlando Rodriguez will be leaving his position as the City of Sonoma's police chief on November 30th, 2022. So per the current agreement for law enforcement services between the City of Sonoma and the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office, under designation of chief, the agreement states the sheriff will coordinate the selection and appointment of the police chief with the city. The sheriff will provide the city with a list of qualified candidates for the selection, and the city manager shall appoint the selected person as the chief of police in accordance with law. So the city has been advised by the Sonoma County Sheriff Department. They have 2 deputies they would like to bring forward as candidates for police chief. So we looked at the process for the last 2 police chiefs, and we will be following the same procedure for those 2 recruitments. In order to ensure diverse representation of the community as well as highlight the unique characteristics of the city, the police chief candidates will meet with 2 interview panels. And so we'll have a community panel, and it will be comprised of executive leadership from our community partner agencies. So it would be Sonoma Valley Unified School District Superintendent. We haven't asked all these people, but this is what we're assuming. Sonoma Valley Community Health Center Executive Director, the Sonoma Valley Chamber of Commerce CEO, Sonoma Community Center Executive Director, and Sonoma Overnight Support Executive Director. And then the second panel would include the Sonoma Valley Fire District Chief, the City of Sonoma Events Manager, because she has a lot of interaction with the police chief, and a police chief from another Sonoma County contract city, as well as 2 city council members. So staff is suggesting that the current council members who will remain in office would, after the November election, would participate in the panel, and that would be Mayor Ding and Council Member Lowe, although the city council can decide otherwise. The interviews are tentatively scheduled to take place on October 19th or October 26th. And then interview feedback from the panels would be provided to the city manager. The city manager would also interview both candidates, and with the feedback from both of the panels would take into prior to the final appointment of the position. So, and if you have any questions, let me know.
That's great. Yeah.
So when exactly are these interviews?
Well, we don't have them set yet, but we were thinking because the Wednesdays work best for the candidates, October 19th or October 26th.
Yeah, that later, if you have the specific day, just let us
Yeah, we would
know.
let everybody know. We have to also invite all the other participants as well. But they haven't officially identified the candidates to us yet, but they've told us that they have 2 candidates. So, and we should know by the end of the week who those candidates are. So, any other questions?
Any question? No questions. All right, let's move to another agenda item.
Oh, we have one more thing we wanted to announce.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes. Yeah, please explain. Yeah.
It's something actually pretty exciting. It's been on my list of want to do's for quite some time. Our streaming system has the ability to timestamp the videos so that when a item starts, you're able to go in and timestamp it so that if someone's interested in a particular item on the agenda, they can click the camera and go directly to that part without having to scroll through it. It's one of those things that takes quite a bit of time to set up, concentrated time, and I'm super excited to say that since Monique's been on board, it's been a project that we've had her working on, and I think it's starting the first meeting in September. They are time-stamped, and as we're going through the meeting, she's time-stamping them. So when it's available after the meeting, you can go directly to an item that you're interested in without having to scroll through the entire item. We are working with the developer now to also try and date stamp or time stamp when a direction was given or a motion was made. It's not in the current development, but it's something we're working with them. But it's something exciting that we get to share and make it easier for the public to access the videos.
Works really well. I've used it.
Just curiosity, if any the local residents requesting any out in the city, previous city council meetings, anything in writing, the records.
You will be seeing a rush of minutes coming forward. We've had them and they've been through and we've gone through, and Monique again has gone through and verified all the motions, because there was some question as to whether the motions were captured accurately. You'll be seeing those. But as in that being said, we only do action minutes. We don't do summary minutes. And so when you do see those, if someone wants to hear what happened at the meeting, that's why we're super excited about the time stamping, because they can go in and see exactly what was discussed, the context around it, rather than the clerk or the person doing the minutes hearing it and then taking it and interpreting it into their own words that may not necessarily capture what the actual, we do the best we can. That's why we switched to action minutes when we did a few years ago. But you will be seeing a rash of minutes that now we've verified they're accurate, and they'll be being caught current from here on out as soon as we get to that point.
Yeah, good to know. Yeah, also, you improved our records. That's great. Archive. All right. If not, I want to move to another agenda item. 9, city attorney comments.
I have no comments this evening. Thank you.
All right. Agenda number 10. The meeting is adjourned.